What's up, world? I'm Cameron McKinney, and this is Pop Culture Spotlight, a podcast about the movie The Devil Wears Prada 2. Here's a quick synopsis. After losing her job as a newspaper journalist, Andy Sachs reunites with her former boss, Miranda Priestly, becoming the new features editor at Runway magazine. The film stars Meryl Streep, Anne Hathaway, Emily Blunt, Stanley Tucci, Simone Ashley, Caleb Herron, Kenneth Branagh, BJ Novak, Justin Theroux, and Lucy Liu. Standout performances. I don't know why, but I find it odd that the role of Miranda Priestly has become, at least in modern times, the most iconic of Meryl Streep roles. Don't get me wrong, she's great as the character. I just like her more in Adaptation, Doubt, Julia and Julia, Florence Foster Jenkins, and Let Them All Talk. The Devil Wears Prada was the most mainstream film of Meryl Streep's career. I mean, not even from just a cultural standpoint, but it still stands as the fourth highest grossing film of her career. So here's where I want to start when it comes to talking about her performance as Miranda in the sequel, where the movie tries to get humor from the character is through showing she's having a hard time adjusting to being a boss in modern times, how she can't be as strict or cruel as she was in the past, and it was a wise choice to make this a side joke throughout the movie instead of the whole arc for the character. As most of you are probably aware, Miranda got divorced in the first Devil Wears Prada. In the sequel, she's married to a musician played by Sir Kenneth Branagh, and I like these scenes together. They have good chemistry, but they're not the most exciting scenes in the movie. I know for a lot of people, when they think about Meryl Streep, the first thing they think of is Miranda. I'm just not in that camp. I may be in the minority on this one, but The Devil Wears Prada and now The Devil Wears Prada 2 works best as a vehicle for Anne Hathaway. She gives, in my opinion, the best performance in the first movie and the best performance in the sequel as well. And this is something I talk about a lot on this podcast. The role of a lead doesn't always get a ton of credit, but their job is arguably the toughest because they have to sell the entire movie, and that is exactly what Hathaway does. And one of the reasons I was hesitant about this sequel is I wasn't sure how they were going to get Andy back to Runway. And I really do like the scenario they came up with. It makes sense. She is in desperate need of a job. Most people's criticism towards this character of Andy in the sequel is going to be about her new love interest. Here's my take. This movie is not at all interested in the romantic life of this character, and it feels like they are being forced to do something with it because they think we care about it. No one cared about Nate in the first film, and no one is going to care about Peter, her new love interest, in The Devil Wears Prada 2. One has to imagine that one of the biggest reasons this sequel got made is because Emily Blunt herself turned into a movie star in the 20 years since The Devil Wears Prada, with films like Sicario, Edge of Tomorrow, Mary Poppins Returns, A Quiet Place, and Oppenheimer, and she was many people's favorite in the first movie as Miranda's top assistant Emily. I'm not going to spoil the arc of the character in the sequel. What I will say is strong choices were made. Like the original, her absolute best scenes are the ones she shares with Hathaway. Another name who has grown more prominent in the years since The Devil Wears Prada is Stanley Tucci. My favorite performances from him have been in 2010's Easy A. Him and Patricia Clarkson mastered the art of playing parents in a teen movie. 2011's Margin Call. He's great in that, especially during one scene with Demi Moore, and 2015 Spotlight. Tucci is just one of those actors you want to see cast in an ensemble film like that, because although he's not the lead, he brings star power and gravity to them. I have the exact same thoughts on him as I did in the first Devil Wears Prada. The best duo in these two movies are Hathaway and Tucci, and what I like most about Nigel is he's the most self-aware character in them, and he's the most honest with Andy. And finally, I want to talk about who I thought was the best new addition to the cast, and that's BJ Novak, who is best known for playing Ryan in The Office. He's the perfect choice to play a spoiled billionaire. I'm kind of sick of movies making billionaires pure evil, when in reality, there's not much going on with them other than their interest in making money. Let's get into my thoughts on the movie as a whole. I think this is what most people want from sequels. There's a nostalgia factor to the movie. You get to see actors you really like reprise these iconic roles. But as you know, there's a balance to these kinds of movies because you have to walk the line between reminding audiences of the past and giving them something new at the same time. And the movie does that because at times you're like, yes, this is what I expect a sequel to The Devil Wears Prada to be. And then there are moments where I was completely surprised and shocked with where the movie went. It's been stated by many about how the movie is commenting on the current state of media more so than it is on the current state of fashion. I really think this movie is working on a grand level because you can get what you want out of it. If you want to look at the movie as a positive ending, you can do so. You can also look at the movie and go, wow, this movie is mirroring how the current state of the world can feel really bleak right now. I know people who believe that sequels should only exist if they one-up the original. And although I like this movie a lot, I do not think it is better or as good as the original The Devil Wears Prada. I think the original is vastly superior to the sequel. And one of the things I really grapple with the sequel is how they don't really talk about the events of the first movie. They do so here and there. I mean, there's an annoying thing in the movie where Miranda pretends like she doesn't remember Andy. It feels like that's the great debate that's happening with this movie right now is this sequel a great continuation of The Devil Wears Prada, or is it just its own thing? I think this movie works best as its own original story. To give you an example of something that really bothered me with this movie, okay, there was a scene where Anne Hathaway's Andy asked Tucci's Nigel, does it still bother you what Miranda did to you at the end of the first movie? And he basically says, I've gotten over it because she's done so much worse to me since. And I get what the purpose of that scene is. The purpose of that scene is to show that time has moved on and these characters are in a new place. But that doesn't change the fact that you are making a sequel to a beloved movie. Like, maybe fill me in with some of the answers to what has gone on with these characters over the past 2 decades. That is the big problem with movie sequels is, yes, you can give Andy a new job. She can have a success. But the minute she's in the room with Miranda, you want them to look back at the past because it's a movie. These are not real people. You are telling a story. Here's a better way to put what I'm saying. I think the movie did a good job about the evolution of the characters. I think it makes sense where Andy is at. I think it makes sense where Miranda is at. I do not think the movie did a great job about the evolution of the relationship between these people. And rightfully or wrongfully, I don't think the movie was that interested in that dynamic between boss and worker anymore. I think it is in the first movie because the first movie is about a boss and an assistant. I think this movie is more interested in ideas. It's ideas about media. It's ideas about billionaires. But when it comes to the personal matters of the characters, I think it sometimes takes the easy way out, like giving Andy and Miranda love interests that absolutely nobody is going to care about. I don't know if most people are going to agree with me. I don't even know if this is a fair criticism of The Devil Wears Prada 2, but I think the original film, The Devil Wears Prada, cared more about the characters themselves. In this movie, The Devil Wears Prada 2 is more interested in making a grand statement about the current state of media. And I think it's hard to argue they made the wrong choice because people are loving this sequel. They are seeing this sequel. They care about this movie. I don't know if anybody's actually saying it's better than the original, but it's a success. Box office. As of this recording, The Devil Wears Prada 2 has made $437 million, which is already more than the original film. And yes, a large part of that has to do with the legacy of the first movie, but it also has to do with the fact that Anne Hathaway and Emily Blunt are much bigger stars than they were 20 years ago. This is an example of how movie stars still matter. Meryl Streep still matters. Anne Hathaway still matters. And Emily Blunt still matters. No, they can't sell every movie they're in, but for this movie, if one of them was not involved, I don't think this film would be as big of a hit as it is. I'm now going to say something that I don't know if most people agree with me on, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think they are getting better at making sequels. Top Gun Maverick, as good as you want it to be. Beetlejuice, really good. Twisters, also really good. And now The Devil Wears Prada 2. It's okay to go back and make a sequel if you're going to do a good job with it. The Devil Wears Prada 2 does a good job. It's enjoyable, it's entertaining, the actors are clearly invested in the movie they're in, they're not disinterested, it's not a cash grab for anybody involved. You can tell that there was passion for the project, and you can only hope for that for other sequels on the way. Like I know, for instance, Anne Hathaway is going to do The Princess Diaries 3. Now, nobody thought that The Princess Diaries 2 was great, but people do enjoy that movie. I think and I hope that The Princess Diaries 3 will be the best of the 3 movies because of where Anne Hathaway is at this point in her career. She's not just going to do a sequel for the sake of doing a sequel. Now, there's one franchise that I hope gets a legacy sequel, and it deserves a legacy sequel, but only if the original 2 actors return, and that's Speed. I want a Speed 3 desperately. I want Keanu Reeves back. I want Sandra Bullock back. I think we as a society need a third Speed movie made just about as good as it can be. I just thought about this, but isn't it crazy that we got The Devil Wears Prada 2 before Legally Blonde 3? I mean, Reese Witherspoon was talking about making Legally Blonde 3 the minute the Top Gun Maverick came out. What are we waiting on here? Take advantage of the moment. People want these kinds of movies, especially if you make them the right way. Oscar chances. Meryl Streep was nominated for The Devil Wears Prada. I would not be surprised to see her nominated for the sequel. Do I think it's some of the best work of her career? No. But this is Meryl Streep we're talking about. When she's in a movie, there's always a chance she gets an Oscar nomination. I would love for Anne Hathaway to get a nomination. I think she deserved one for the original, but my prediction is her big 2026 will lead to a nomination for Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Unfortunately, I don't see Stanley Tucci or Emily Blunt getting nominated for their performances. The big question is, will The Devil Wears Prada 2 get one of the 10 slots for Best Picture? And I think there's a real big chance that it does, because as you've seen in the recent years, they have become more friendly to studio movies. F1 got nominated for Best Picture. I know a lot of people will hear that and say, well, The Devil Wears Prada 2 is way better than F1. I disagree with those people, but I get the sentiment. My point is, for a lot of people, The Devil Wears Prada 2, like F1, is a popcorn 4-quadrant movie made for everybody to enjoy. But the quality of the movie itself is enough to possibly justify a Best Picture nomination. The Devil Wears Prada 2 is not going to get nominated for Best Picture, and it's only going to get spot number 10. It's not that big of a deal. The reactions to this film, The Devil Wears Prada 2, feel similar to that of the reactions of the first movie, in that if you are a supporter of these movies, you are way louder than the detractors. Like, the people who really support this movie are the loudest voices in the room. Meaning, those people will make you believe that you are talking about one of the best movies of 2026 when you are talking about The Devil Wears Prada 2. And I just don't think that will end up being the case, but that's not a bad thing. I think The Devil Wears Prada 2 is exactly what I want it to be. I don't think it's a masterpiece. I don't think it's as good as the first movie, but I enjoyed watching it. I don't know if it's going to be a movie I revisit over and over again, like I'm willing to do with The Devil Wears Prada. That passion is a big reason why this sequel got made, and it could very well end up being the reason that we end up getting a third Devil Wears Prada movie. We know for a fact this movie is going to make upwards of $700 million, and if this movie gets to that magic number of $1 billion, you cannot tell me that in the next 5 years we're not going to get The Devil Wears Prada free. I just don't believe you. They will not let this franchise go to sleep for another 20 years before making a third movie if the movie reaches that astronomical success. Sometimes when they make sequels, you can tell that they figured out in real time that people do not care about the franchise as much as they used to. That is definitely not the case with The Devil Wears Prada. People want to consume more of it. Guys, there's going to be a third film. Remember, Top Gun Maverick happened. It was a huge success, and the lesson learned was let's make a third Top Gun movie, even if the same director, Joseph Kosinski, is possibly not going to direct it. There's going to be a third The Devil Wears Prada movie. The last thing I want to talk about on this podcast is an observation I have. I think The Devil Wears Prada is more funny than The Devil Wears Prada 2. I think the sequel is less comedic, which I thought was a choice and a bold one. One that I actually admire. Like, I think the original The Devil Wears Prada is all about the funny dialogue, all the Emily Blunt lines, the lines given to Meryl Streep, and the sequel basically gives up on all of that. Now, some could argue they probably did try to replace that humor, and maybe it just didn't work on me. But it does say something that I really do like this movie without thinking it's one of the funnier movies I've seen lately. Overall, The Devil Wears Prada 2 is just a smart, well thought out movie with ideas that I'm also interested in. We all know there's a million bad directions this franchise could have gone in. If they had just tried to hit on the nostalgia factor, this would have been a miserable failure. But they took these characters in a different direction and yet somehow brought them back together in a way that made sense. In the long haul, I don't think this will end up being one of the best movies that Meryl Streep has been in, that Anne Hathaway has been in, that Stanley Tucci has been in, or that Emily Blunt has been in. But for a sequel to one of their most beloved movies, this is a best case scenario because the box office proves that people still care about the movie and the reviews show that people like the movie. And I really do mean this next thing as a compliment, and I feel the exact same way about Top Gun Maverick. I think you can watch this without watching the original Devil Wears Prada. I think you can get this movie and think it's good without seeing the original, the same way you can watch Top Gun Maverick without seeing Top Gun. And I think that's the hallmark of a good sequel, a movie that can stand on its own. Yes, of course, it helps if you have a history with the characters and the actors in the movie, but I think you could watch The Devil Wears Prada 2 and understand what the movie is going for without seeing The Devil Wears Prada. I also find it very hard to believe that if one of your favorite movies of all time is The Devil Wears Prada, that you are going to be unsatisfied by the sequel. I think you're going to enjoy it. I don't think you're going to like it as much as you like the original movie, but even if that's the case, that's okay. I think The Devil Wears Prada 2 is a really good movie. What else is there to say? This is a huge victory for all involved. It's a huge victory for Meryl Streep, Anne Hathaway, Emily Blunt, and Stanley Tucci. And I'm excited to see what all four of them end up doing with this success. Thanks for listening to this edition of Pop Culture Spotlight. I'm Cameron McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Thursday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I I highly recommend you check out The Devil Wears Prada 2. Next week on the podcast, I'm talking about the film People We Meet on Vacation, starring Emily Bader and Tom Blythe. So tune into that and please rate, review, and subscribe.